I'm Kathy Eshelman, the Vice President of Membership for the Ohio Chamber of Commerce. This year we celebrate our 125th anniversary. As a part of our year-long celebration, we will be bringing you many stories about our rich history and of the people who made the Ohio Chamber one of the largest and most respected organizations in the state of Ohio. Today, I have the distinct honor of talking with Speaker Ann Davidson. Speaker Davidson worked at the Ohio Chamber in several capacities during her tenure before going on to ultimately become the first and only female Speaker of the House. She was a driving force behind shaping the future of the Ohio Chamber as a part of her distinguished career. Today, we continue in her legacy of excellence as we continue to champion free enterprise, economic competitiveness, and growth for the benefit of all Ohioans. Following her 20 years of outstanding public service, she formed her own business, JAD and Associates, and the Ohio Leadership Institute was formed in her honor. Today, we will discuss her time at the Ohio Chamber and what she's up to these days. Hello, Speaker Davidson, and thank you for joining me.
Well, Kathy, thank you for inviting me.
Awesome. We've, as a part of our celebration, we've been able to go through our archives, and it's been very interesting for me to actually be able to see some of the things that you've done and when you were at the Ohio Chamber. I think what we found out was that in 1971, you started as a research associate and a supervisor to the clerical staff and the library. Can you tell us about that?
Well, maybe to be very honest with you, I was hired as a typist. I had taken a typing test and evidently passed it fairly easily, and they were in dire need of a typist. And there was a lady there working who had been there for a number of years, and she was going to be retiring. And so they kind of brought me in to work with her for a period of time and sort of pick up everything that she had been doing, since she had been a really stalwart and long, time good employee for the chamber. So it was interesting to me. I had done some local chamber work before that. I'd worked for 9 years with the chamber in my home community of Findlay, Ohio. So I had some chamber background, but it's entirely different from the local chamber to the priorities of the state chamber. There's a lot of mutual things, but the state chamber really represents the entire state of Ohio business community. And that's why I totally agree with you that it's a well-respected organization and has been for years.
That's awesome. I know I heard Betty Montgomery say once, sometimes the side door is still an entrance. So I think that sounds like maybe you came in the side door to get to some other ultimate jobs that you probably were more qualified for at the time. We also show in 1977 you had become a finance specialist. What was that job and how did you get to that?
Well, actually, I've always been interested in the financial aspects of it. My true job wish was to be a CPA sitting in some corner with a good set of books, but that didn't happen. So what I did do, however, the chamber was an expert on publishing information dealing with the finances of the state of Ohio. So we would look at every bond issue that had been put out there, what the debt was, how the state was keeping up with their debt. We would have all of the analysis of the various budgets. So there was really a lot to do. I worked with a great gentleman and a great teacher for me while I was there, and I enjoyed doing that, quite frankly.
That's awesome. Do you think that time as a finance specialist actually prepared you in some ways for the budgets and the budget process when you went to the House of Representatives? I know you're really known for being very prepared when you come to meetings, and so I just wonder if that really had an effect on that.
I think there were two things, not just working with Jim O'Leary, who was doing the finance, but Jack Reimers, who was the great tax expert, quite frankly, all the years he's with the chamber. And so we would go to lunch together every day, and we would just talk about state finances. Not many people think that's the pretty interesting thing to talk about at lunch, but we did. And I certainly picked it up, and I certainly felt much better prepared to actually be a state representative than I would have been if I hadn't had that opportunity to learn from them.
I think we saw in the archives in 1978 you became the Director of Legislative Services. What was that job at the time, and what did you do?
Well, the job at the time really was to cover the legislature, to keep the staff informed of things that are happening in the legislature that would be extremely interesting, the chamber would be extremely interested in, and then to be sure that we presented the arguments either for or against. I spent a lot of hours sitting in committee meetings, just following the discussions and being able to come back and report to the board and report to the staff. And then we really broadened that out a little bit to have a little more political activity. the chamber had. And so we started a public affairs committee every year at election time or every other year. We would go over all of the candidates. We would look at where they stand on some of the important issues. We would invite them in. We established a political action committee. We established some endorsement of candidates, which was really a new thing for chambers of commerce to actually get it that much into the political arena. But it was necessary if you were going to carry your message, quite frankly, that you talked with and supported those people who agreed with you on business taxation, economic development, all of the things, energy issues, so that you could do a better job if you had actually a little bit more information and it built better relationships in the legislature.
You know, that's really awesome, because it sounds like to me this was really beginning to form kind of the information that you needed to know and probably learn even more and more and get integrated into the process, so that when you did go to the House of Representatives, you really kind of already knew the lay of the land and what was going on.
I was very lucky to know the lay of the land. You're absolutely right. And I always thought it was very easy. I was sitting out in the audience, and I couldn't understand why those people on the other side of the table, thought like they did or voted like they did. I soon found that it wasn't as easy as I thought it was.
Right.
But I still believed very strongly in the purposes and actually the principles of the Ohio Chamber of Commerce.
That's awesome. I think by 1984, you had actually become the Vice President of Special Programs. What were those special programs, and why did you go to that position?
Well, after I decided to run for the legislature and was elected and started my responsibilities in '81, it would have been a conflict of interest for me, frankly, to continue to do the legislative affairs for the chamber as a sitting member of the legislature. So they were kind enough to sort of establish a different position for me to go in where I could help to develop the special programs.
Okay.
So I got to be the one that would set up the meetings and go in and test the mic to be sure it was working before the speaker got there. But I had a lot of fun actually doing our annual or semi-annual, not semi-annual, I'd say every 2-year thing that we do down at the state park.
Right.
And so it was kind of turned over to us by some of the local chambers. And so it was a great opportunity for the chamber to develop this program every 2 years, to invite the members of the legislature and to have the discussions on those major issues that were facing the business community. That part of it was fun, but I did a lot of other organization of the other meetings, and it was good training for me.
I bet.
And so I've never lost the fact that you always want to have a room look like it's overcrowded, so you never put up as many chairs as you need. So if you think that's accidental, it's not. That's the old chamber rule. If you have to bring in extra chairs, then remember it's a successful meeting.
That's great. You did go on to be the co-chair of the RNC and ultimately in charge of putting on the convention, the national convention. So it sounds like to me those were some early days of really learning how to put that together and make it professional and well done.
I can't think of really anything I did after that I didn't rely back on my experience with the Ohio Chamber of Commerce to help me to, have a feel for how you put it together, the back of the room types of things.
Right.
And putting together a big convention is just many times of what we would do with our other meetings here. But it was good training for me, very good training.
No, I've been to a couple of those and had a chance to see how hard you're working and see how just amazingly organized they are and what it takes to get them to come off that way. Speaking of the Salt Fork Public Policy Conference we have every other year, that's still one of our signature products or events we have. And because people really come, the legislators are able to come, and then we have, businesses come, and it's really great for people to have some time away from the city a little bit to just really talk and get to know each other. So I think that they've had more cooperation, or it certainly works to more cooperation when they're actually working on policy at the State House. Would you agree?
It just proves that it's relationships that you build with each other and the trust that you build up as an organization, that you're not giving them bad information, you're not sending people with the wrong message, that type. And I think it solidifies their opinion of the Ohio Chamber of Commerce, frankly.
That's awesome. So as you look back at all the years that you worked at the Ohio Chamber, which was 71 to 1993, I believe, is that correct? Can you tell us, just maybe some of your fond memories that you might have, or what it was kind of like working here overall?
I think obviously you always celebrated when you had a victory in the legislature that that you either defeated something or actually you helped to get something passed. It was important. So those were actually the types of things when we would stand up as an organization and take a position on a very controversial issue that might be on the ballot and realize that what we said and what we did and the research we did made a lot of difference in how the voter looked at it. I think the chamber now, and I have an opportunity through the years and continue to have to look at some polling data. And if you really test which organization that you have the most confidence in, the Ohio Chamber of Commerce usually ends up as the number one organization that people trust.
So as we fast forward to your time in the Ohio House, and do you know about how many women were serving with you and what it was like to be one of those few women in the room?
All I remember is that after the 1982 election, at least in the Ohio House of Representatives, among my party's representatives, we went down to just 3 women as part of that. And so it's varied, but usually the number of women that serve in the legislature in Ohio has sort of been at that 23 to 25% level. It seems to be stuck.
It does, yes.
Every once in a while it will bump up above it. I was always pleased that in the years I was speaker, that it usually bumped up above it. I spent a lot of time recruiting women candidates and encouraging them to run. Obviously, as you know, I'm still doing that, recruiting women candidates and hoping to encourage them to run. So it's been pretty stagnant. I really thought with term limits, that number would have an opportunity to grow because so many of the men had been at those positions for so long and they were term limited out. But it didn't happen that way. Obviously, women needed to be well positioned in their own counties, have had some political experience, that type of thing. And at that particular time, when we had the openings, we didn't really have women that kind of fell in that category. So I was disappointed, but we keep plugging away and hopefully it will grow in the future.
We do, which actually brings me my next question to talk to you about the Ann Davidson Ohio Leadership Institute. As you know, I'm a very proud graduate from the 2004 class. Frankly, it changed my life. I always knew my whole life I wanted to be, involved in politics, and this was like the door that opened for me and showed me, how you do it, and met a great network of women across the state that I'm really grateful for. And I know you have a saying about when you try to recruit women, and I think this is some of the things we're trying to get over now, but what happens when you ask a woman if she wants to run for office?
Well, generally they say, "Oh, I couldn't do that. I don't have that experience. I wouldn't even think about able to do. I don't know how I would do that." And they had all of the objections, and so I always felt that really the lack of self-confidence in themselves was one of the detriments. The other thing that you mentioned is when you were asked, they waited to be asked to run for office rather than stepping forward when they thought that they had a problem with the representation in their city or in the state, that they would step forward and take it. So I was trying to figure out a way to ensure them that they did have the ability to do the job, to try to get them to be bigger risk takers, which they're not very good risk takers, quite frankly, and want to be guaranteed that they could win, and there's no such guarantee. And it's difficult for them, frankly, to raise money because they can go raise money for every charitable organization, but when it comes to asking it for themselves, they're very reluctant to do that. So those are the kind of things that we try to work with in the Institute. But the biggest, as you know, advantage of the Institute is relationships that you build with each other, the other members of your class that last for years. And that's where your support group comes from.
I know I've told you before, but I'm very blessed with a nice network of friends. And I will say it is absolutely true that a great number of those women I've met through the Institute, and it's pretty fabulous. So I'm still grateful. Thank you for the
Because it's been a few years since you went through,
It
right?
was, yeah, it was. I think it's been, 14 years. That time has flown by.
And you still have those good friends.
And I still have them. And it's really incredible. They're amazing women. Obviously, we have a common interest, and so that's great to have them. So you started your own business, JAD and Associates. So going from the Ohio Chamber, obviously, to public service again, and then starting that. What's it like to own a small business since we're here at the Ohio Chamber today?
Well, obviously, you've had some experience in ownership of a small business, so it was sort of an eye-opener, quite frankly, and you could then understand where some of your constituents had been complaining to you about too much government regulation,
Yes.
government giving them, too many things that they had to do, and frankly, diverting their time from running the business actually to complying with those types of things. But it was a real challenge to do that, to see whether you could do it. I started it rather late in my career, but it's been fun to do that, and it's been a good feeling to be able to help some of your clients to understand the legislative process, to help them get things started on the right foot, to give them good advice, hopefully, on how to go through the process of getting something either defeated or something actually accomplished. And so I would say overall it's been a very good experience for me.
I love to hear that you actually became obviously a small businesswoman. I just wanted to just touch again on the Ann Davidson Institute. It's like a year-long, maybe a September through May program, and women apply for the position,
Yes.
and then there's a very tough screening process because we have so many qualified women now from across the state applying. And the idea behind it was to really take women who are competent and actually help them learn more leadership skills, which is trained throughout the year, speaking skills,
Right.
just know everything about the state of Ohio that you might be interested in regarding policy and the different departments and agencies. And I know you do really bring a great VIP list of people to talk to us, and it was really a great experience. How did that really get started in the beginning?
I think it got started, actually started in the state of Indiana, started the first state of Illinois, then followed suit in Pennsylvania and a few other states.
Okay.
We took the programs that they had started and kind of redrafted them a little bit to fit into Ohio, but it really came out of the time the idea was discussed, out of my frustration of spending so many years recruiting candidates and finding women candidates so difficult to recruit, and also my experience once the women candidates got elected. They did their jobs, they took care of their constituents' needs, they were hard workers, and they did it around the clock for the House or the Senate, and you really didn't have to worry about them actually preparing themselves to get reelected because it was something that they were dedicated to doing. Plus the fact that I saw the difference that it made in having women on committees. When we've come from different experiences many times, and if you don't have women there, that experience isn't related to the public policy discussion that's going on. And we're generally probably a little bit easier to work with each other across party lines. We're not afraid to actually consult each other and work with each other to do that. So I think if we could, elect a few more women to the legislature at all levels, whether it's city councils or township or school board or whatever it is, I think there would be more civility, and I think frankly, the cooperation over and above the political differences would be helpful.
That would be. A friend of mine really convinced me to be the co-president of the PTO for my daughter's elementary school, and now again as a part of her high school. And she has a saying that I think sounds pretty relevant now. She said, we need more women in the legislature and more men in the PTO. And both would probably gain from that. So
that's very true.
And that a great assessment of the situation. So I think that really concludes all the questions I can think of. Do you have anything else you'd just like to share or talk about that you find that our viewers or our businesses that are members might find interesting?
No, I think one of the things is that it's so much easier to do many of these things on behalf of the entire business community when you have good, strong members who are willing to step forward and to help you do that. Serve as officers or board members or come and testify before the legislature. That makes a difference. It's hard to just say, okay, you go do this job for us. And so what I've done through the years, I can't tell you how much I've learned from the wonderful people, members of the chamber through the years, who actually stepped forward and took that leadership and would be very helpful in doing that. I would probably say that if I've had any success, as a legislator, I give a great deal of that credit to the years I spent at the Ohio Chamber of Commerce.
Well, today, thank you so much for coming in. I learned a lot through this process and about you and about the Ohio Chamber, and it's really fabulous to hear that. So thank you for sharing your
Thank
stories.
you, Kathy, for inviting me, and congratulations to the Ohio Chamber on its anniversary.
Thank you.